My email Penpal. So I just discovered this subreddit recently, and it reminded me of something that happened to me over 8 years ago. I came into school one day super excited because my teachers had been hinting at a special surprise for about a week. I was about 7 years old at the time, and I love surprises. My teacher announced that we were going to be becoming pen pals with some soldiers overseas. We must have spent an hour writing those letters, and I remember mine being all about Harry Potter and examining Snape as a character. My letter was 5 pages long, whereas most of my peers only wrote 1 page. We sent our letters in the mail, and within 3 weeks, almost everyone had gotten a letter back, everyone but me. I realize now in my rational mind that my pen pal was probably shot or died in war. However, at that age, I didn't even realize people died in war, so I waited another 2 weeks before taking matters into my own hands. I went on some forum, the name of which I can't recall, and posted that I was looking for a pen pal and for anyone interested to email me at whatever email address I had back then. I got an email from a girl in Barbados. She introduced herself as 9 years old. I was thrilled to have an older pen pal and didn't tell anyone about her because I wanted to keep her to myself. Fast forward 1 month, and I have complete trust with my pen pal. I gave her my phone number. I sat by my house phone all day waiting for her to call. She did, but when she called, it sounded more like an adult than a kid. I disregarded that, knowing some people's voices sound different over the phone. She called a few times a week for 2 weeks. The final time she called, she told me she was vacationing in the US and would be in my area. I was ecstatic and suggested we meet up during my recess time at a park at about a half-mile away from my school. The day of the meeting came, and I walked from the playground to the school parking lot, which was easy since there were no fences. One of my teachers noticed and came up to me. I remember the conversation with near clarity. "Where are you going, sweetie?" "I'm going to the park." "You can't leave school during the day." "I'm just going to see my pen pal." "Your pen pal? Your pen pal never wrote back, honey." "I know, which is why I found one on the internet. She came all the way from Barbados to come meet me." At that point, my teacher grabbed my arm and handed me over to a student teacher to bring inside. They made me tell my story to the principal, who in turn called someone. He obviously called the police, but my 7-year-old mind didn't understand that. I asked him who he was calling, and he told me he was telling my friend I couldn't come to the park that day. I never got another email from my friend, obviously, but I did get a letter from a different soldier the next week. My online buddy. So when I was 12 years old, back in 2002, we had several computers at home. Even though we lived in a pretty rural area, one was mine. A couple of my friends did too. We used to message each other on AIM. As a curious youngster, I got into the chat rooms. I met this guy there named Ian. We exchanged ASL, and because I was young and kinda stupid, I was always honest about mine. Ian was from England and 14 years old. We exchanged emails to talk more. He sent me a couple pictures of himself, and he was fairly cute. He asked for pictures of me always, but we didn't have a webcam, and I certainly couldn't buy one and install it without my parents knowing. Gradually, over time, his messages became more and more sexually focused, and I started replying less. He also kept pressuring me about the webcam he wanted me to buy, and started hinting he wanted me to masturbate on camera for him. He started sending me porn. I was a precocious 12-year-old and read quite a bit of erotica online, but because our computers were in the family room, never looked at pictures or videos. He never warned me the pictures or videos he sent were porn, so I almost got caught with them up on my screen a couple times when I opened attachments. I decided I was not going to reply to him any longer. He sent me one last very explicitly titled video, and then I didn't hear from him again. Several years passed. I stopped using that email address. I was 18 now, and trying to get into an account that I made with that email, and open it up to check for a password reset email. Lo and behold, I had an email from Ian. I was surprised, since it seemed to have been sent quite recently, and the title was, "Hey everyone." I opened the email to find that I am only one of about 200 recipients. It is an announcement that he has got engaged, giving a wedding date later that year. I felt faintly nauseated. Now that I'm older, I realize exactly how disturbing it was for him to repeatedly ask for pictures of me and send me porn. Granted, he was 14, so we were not far apart his age, but in retrospect, the whole thing was gross. The email is signed with his full name, and he includes links to his Facebook account and other contact info to RSVP, including his girlfriend's email, so I look him up on Facebook. As I'm going through his profile, I see his birth date and age. He was, at this time, when I was 18, 25 years old, which meant that when I was 12, he was not 14 as he claimed, but rather 18 or 19. I briefly considered sending the entirety of our email chains, attachments included, to his girlfriend. I then considered sending them to the emails of the 200 people that had been sent to his engagement announcement email. I ended up doing nothing. To this day, I'm not sure if I made the right choice. Creepy online groomer. Many years ago, when I was 11 years old, we had a very sudden and unexpected death in the family. Everyone was devastated and trying to cope with their grief in their own way while dealing with the fallout. Not long after this, just before summer vacation, my best friend and her family moved abroad for 6 months, so I was feeling particularly sad and lonely and started playing on the computer a lot more. We had just gotten dial-up a year or so before, so I was able to use the internet to play online games, but very quickly became bored and wished I was able to talk to my friend. When I remembered a classmate had mentioned they had a Penpal, I googled Penpals, and the result came out with an instant chat room, which, to my 11-year-old mind, seemed much better than waiting weeks for letters. The description said it was for people 13 plus, but I paid no mind and signed up anyways, and had a few enjoyable days chatting to faraway strangers from Germany, Canada, and even Australia. It was good fun and quite interesting to talk to new people, but then I kept getting kicked off by mods doing the rounds when they found out I was only 11 years old, so I changed my answer to 13, and then I met James. James was 26, male, from Ireland, and seemed very nice and polite, and we talked for about 40 minutes. He asked what year and grade I was going into after the summer break, and deciding by this point that he wasn't a mod, I told him I was actually only 11 and just about to go into high school. When I had to get off the computer and go to bed, I was very surprised the next day when James initiated another chat with me, since you didn't normally chat to the same person unless you specifically taken a note of their username and watch for them to come online. We chatted a lot longer this time. He said he lived alone in a specially built cottage because he had been in a motorcycle accident when he was 17, which left him paralyzed in a wheelchair. He liked talking about what I did at school and my friend and what kind of games we played. He asked if I had worn a school uniform and did my school require me to wear one, because when he was in school, it was a Catholic school and you absolutely always had to wear your uniform. Weeks passed of near daily talking. We had moved on to MSN chat by that point because he said he wanted to be able to email me when he thought of things he'd like to chat about, and I could just email him back if he wasn't online. When he starts to get annoyed that I can only chat when I was allowed on the computer, and even then, I could only be on it for a few hours at a time, so started pestering me to give him my mobile number so we could at least text if I wasn't able to get online. Not long after that, he began asking if he could call me. He wanted to hear my voice, and really, how different was it to talking online? Didn't I want to hear what an Irish accent sounded like? Wasn't I interested in him? We only spoke on the phone once. He sounded reasonably young, and either was actually Irish or just very good at putting the accent on. He commented on how young I sounded, jokingly asking if I had been naughty and lied about my age again. Then the chats and texts got more intrusive. Where are you now? What are you doing? Why are you taking so long to reply? Are you in your pajamas? What color knickers have you got on? I would tell him off when he asked things like that, because I didn't like it, and I would tell him I was miffed. He would swing between acting all remorseful and begging for forgiveness, saying he was being silly like that. He was just interested in me, and why is that such a hard question? I'm obviously just a badly behaved silly little girl, and he is done wasting his time talking to me. His punishment was swift and brutal, cutting off all contact for a few days or so, leaving me confused and upset that I really was a terrible friend. He came back acting like nothing ever happened though, and in the end, I just started saying whatever random color came to my mind when he asked. Then he started asking about meeting up. He would travel over to see me, because I obviously couldn't travel to see him, and instead of going to school, he would take me out for a few days so we could get to know each other properly. When I seemed hesitant to agree to this plan, he would become irate. What's the point in having a friend you can never see? Didn't I know he was falling in love with me? I told him he couldn't be because I was so much younger than him, and he responded by saying it doesn't matter because his father is a lot older than his mother, and anyways, we could get married when I turned 16. I said I wasn't even starting to think about getting married or leaving home, and he blew up yelling, saying I was a horrible child who is obvious against people who are in wheelchairs. I was cruel and lazy, assuming I would have to wheel him around everywhere. How selfish of me to not consider the feelings of my husband to be, before cutting off contact again. By this time, I wasn't in any hurry to hear from him, so I didn't send him any of my usual apology texts and emails, which I think surprised him. A couple of days later, he emailed, as usual, acting like nothing had happened, but talking about booking tickets to come visit when school started up again in a few weeks. I did not respond. He texted, then emailed again, and again. His emails at first concerned, then more and more annoyed at my lack of response. Finally, I told my older sibling a superficial explanation of someone on my email who was bothering me, and they emailed him from an account telling him to leave me alone, or I would tell my dad. I never heard from him again. That was actually kind of cathartic. I never told anyone of the full details of this, because I've always been ashamed and embarrassed about it. Anyway, so James, you bloody creep, let's still not meet. He used religion to disarm me. Jesus. I've written and rewritten this a dozen times, and it never feels good enough. I'm in a really bad depression right now, so trying to function must less adequately explain one of the most traumatic experiences of my life in a cohesive and engaging worthy of a good let's not meet post. It feels like attempting to run a marathon through wet cement. I've been exhausting my brain trying to write about this experience. I keep giving up because it's daunting and overwhelming to try and organize all of my thoughts into how I'm feeling. I'm a perfectionist. It's a long story, and there are a lot of elements at play that allowed for this to happen, so I usually give up trying to explain it. My goal is to just get this out and try to recount my experience as best as I can. Fuck! I hate writing about this, because even though this was 2 years ago, I still really struggle to come to terms with the fallout of what happened, and I don't want people thinking I'm just stupid or for doing what I did. This man fooled a lot of people and not just me, but I have to believe I would never have behaved the way I did if I was thinking rationally. I'm hoping it'll be cathartic to just let it out, so please bear with me. Although this is a Let's Not Meet post, and deservedly so, it is also very much a reflection for me about my first experience with bipolar disorder and mania, because the two events coincided simultaneously. I don't think one would have fully happened without the other. Okay, here it goes. This friendship was short-lived, but it all started in October of 2016. I was 24 years old at the time, and living in Mission Valley in San Diego at the time, California. I love living in Mission Valley because it's pretty central to all the action in San Diego, 50 minutes away from the beach and downtown, but not run down or overcrowded like some part of SD. The apartment I live in was in a nicer development, and luxury apartments were being built across the streets, basically a pretty safe area. This morning, I decided to go for a run at the Fenton Parkway Shopping Center. In it, there's a bunch of restaurants along with a Costco, IKEA, and the Mission Valley Library. This center also has a trolley stop. That's important. My plan that morning was to run to the center and treat myself to Starbucks. As a reward for working out, I was really into running at the time. I remember exactly what I was wearing. Running shorts and one of those shirt tanks with the sides cut off where you can see the sports bra underneath. I had on a pink sports bra, just doing my thing. I get there and I'm finishing up my Starbucks when my dad calls me. I answer my phone and my dad fills me in that my younger brother, Daniel, is in the hospital. This wasn't shocking news to me. My parents have been debating about whether or not he should go in. I had said the night before that I thought he should. Here's some crucial backstory, and why they were telling me this. Mental illness sucks, and it runs in my family. My mother has suffered from depression since I was born, and my little brother has been showing signs and symptoms of someone who is developing schizophrenia. My whole family was worried about him, and the night before I had talked to my folks and advised that he go inpatient to be at least safe. I myself has 2 episodes of extremely bad depression in my lifetime at this point, and they fucking sucked. 2015 to 2016 had been the worst year of my life, and ultimately culminated in a hospital stay after months of refusing to be helped. This was in July of 2016, and it was a turning point for me. I got on medication, reconnected with family and friends after isolating for a year, and began to rebuild my life. It obviously wasn't that easy, but things totally turned around for the better, and by October of 2016, when this story takes place, I was happier than I'd ever been before, loving life and waking up each day with actual confidence and eagerness to start the day. If it sounds like a complete 180, well, that's because it was, cue, a bipolar cycle that I wasn't even aware I was having. More of a side note, I've always struggled with social anxiety to a degree. Even without depression, I get anxious, and I'm too hyper-aware of myself when interacting with a group. I'm really friendly and hide it well, I think, but at the core, I'm pretty introverted and reserved. I'm sure everyone experiences this to some degree, obviously, but I remember envying others where total social ease just seemed to come naturally, and never had for me. But in the fall of 2016, it was different. I know a lot of Reddit hates Amy Schumer, but it's like the trailer for the movie I Feel Pretty. Confidence. I suddenly had tons of it. Looking back at things, it's clear I was just hypomanic, but at the time, I had no idea that this was happening. I just felt like I was self-actualizing and finding the person I wanted to be: confident, pretty smart, outgoing, generous, kind. I had the words to say and could strike up a conversation with anyone. More than that, I wanted to. I felt like I connected with everyone and I could be anyone's friend. I was really spiritual at this time too. I grew up a pastor's kid and I've always had faith. But now, more than ever, I felt connected to God, and I swear, I was seeing signs of his existence everywhere. Also, a common trend in the mania that I did not know about. I learned about this later. Yeah, manic thinking leads you to some extremely poor decisions and judgments. A lot of people blow through finances and make reckless decisions when manic. Okay, now back to the story. Thanks for bearing with me. The phone call. While I'm on the phone with my dad, I kind of distractedly started walking around the center. I make my way over to the library parking lot, and there's a few people milling around because it hasn't opened yet. Obviously, I was in my own little world with this conversation, and didn't really care if people could overhear me. Normally, I hate talking on the phone in public, but Kelly 2.0 didn't give a shit. I remember praying with my dad for my little brother's health, and talking about how life is crazy because I've been in a similar situation just a few months back, feeling hopelessly suicidal even. Totally oversharing in public, whatever, right? I get off the call and get a tap on my shoulder. Excuse me, miss? I turn around. A short black man in his 60s, wearing a hat that says Navy on it, is standing to my right. Excuse me. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. Are you a Christian? Why, yes. I said that I was. I am too. My name's Tony, and I just wanted to say I am inspired by your faith. I wanted to ask, is it okay if I pray for your brother as well? I was honestly so touched by the kindness of this random stranger. It was a bold thing to do, but at the time, I just remember being really inspired and moved that he would offer to pray with me. I actually thought he might be a pastor or something. He had that vibe. People talk about creeps and how they're dirty and classically creepy looking. I honestly didn't get that vibe from this guy at all. Also, this was 9 a.m. on a sunny October morning with other people around. I didn't feel threatened in the least. He wasn't asking for anything. He's 5'5" and I'm 6 feet tall. I said sure, and we moved to a bench where he prays a short prayer, short but really meaningful. During his prayer, at one point, he puts his hand on my knee. I'm uncomfortable with this and about to shift, but before I'm about to, he removes it. I was too polite to say anything, and he continued on praying. A lot of people in the church will lay hands on each other to pray as a sign of comfort, and so this isn't something setting off huge alarm bells, but I remember how I felt in that second vividly, exposed and uncomfortable. Now, I look back on what I was wearing and feel sick. It was painfully obvious why I was approached at the time, but at the time I was naively trusting in the goodness of strangers. After that, I kind of forgot how the conversation went exactly, but we basically launched into a super deep conversation about life. I would normally never open up with a stranger, but I was hypomaniacally friendly, and he was really funny and well-spoken. He tells me he's a Navy vet. I reveal that I used to work with vets as a nurse, and we bond over that. He says his wife Gloria was a nurse, but she died in 2005, and after that, things went downhill for him. I talked about my past year and how hard it's been, and he said he could definitely relate to the struggle. He revealed that he was living in a shelter and goes to the library every day because he's studying to go back to school with some military-assisted program, that he's only survived this long because of his faith. I forget what else we talked about, but in all honesty, the conversation lasted over an hour outside in the sunshine. This guy was incredibly insightful and eloquent. He had some really good insights into the Bible, and he clearly knows his stuff. Before I leave, he asked if I want to stay in touch and maybe even meet at a library again for a Bible study. I said sure. We exchanged email addresses, and I remember running home thinking how cool it was, human connection and meeting another strong Christian and all that. When I got home, I even wrote a blog post about it. I still have it now, and it makes me cringe in hindsight. 2 days later, I get an email. It's from Tony. I open it up and I'm surprised because for how spoken he was in person, this dude had the writing of a 10-year-old on AIM, all caps and run-on sentences. I still have the emails. Here's what he wrote. Hello. Didn't have time to write you, but today I have. We need to see each other and then you can update me on how your brother is doing. I miss you extremely and not ashamed to say it. The Lord has a word for you, and I want to tell you in person. Let's set up a date for this to happen. I will be here at the library tomorrow, and we can meet here, okay? Anyways, there is so much going on in your life, but I want you to reflect on this. There is a time and place for everything under the sun. And this day, choose the word faith. It's ongoing for you. Your faith is faltering when it comes to your brother. You see him hurting, and you want it to be over quickly. Well, sorry. Love, this is going to take time and some sacrifice on your part. Anyway, contact me today if you see this. I'll be here until 3 p.m. today. I made a mental note to get back to him, but got distracted and forgot. I get this the next day. I'm sure you are very, very busy with things on the home front, but at least advise me on what's going on, because I do love you as a sister in Christ and want you happy. It's been 2 days now. I'm starting to worry about you. Please, advise. And also, I sent you an invite to hang out where we can talk. Talk to me, honey. I emailed him back updating him on my brother and said I would be free to meet up the following week. His response: I'm happy to hear that your brother is doing better, and yes, I can meet you here at the library on Wednesday. It'll be great to see you again. I'll be here today by 8:30. Are you okay? Anyway, my life have been pure blessing by knowing you and receiving your spiritual love. It only come from God, as I do. No, I love you very, very much. Hope things are going well for you, and I look forward to our next encounter. I'm homeless, but I have a home in glory, so I don't fret about the place and circumstances I found myself in. I had a dream about you the other night. I will tell you next time I see you. It was awe-inspiring. Read Matthew 4:19, and will give you a clue. I reread his emails cringing at so many fucking red flags. It makes me want to punch myself in the face. I'm a 24-year-old woman, not an 8-year-old. This guy is pushy. He would call me honey, boo, love. I know it's obviously weird, but honestly, at the time, I truly dismissed it, just the way he would talk, as just a term of endearment in a grandpa sort of way. As an older black guy, it was sort of what made him funny. I told my cousin Emily about meeting Tony, and we planned to meet up. She texted me this: Kel, if you decide to do this, please meet in a public place and please bring Scott. Scott is my older brother. You have a beautiful heart and don't know how pretty you are. I don't want this guy getting the wrong ideas. I definitely remember laughing at the thought of some romantic thing. This dude was definitely old enough to be my grandpa. It looks like the cousin of Gary Coleman. It was comical to me. There was no way I'm interested, and he obviously knows I'm not interested. We were meeting for a Bible study, but then my head returns to that moment at the library and think, I should, just to be safe. Scott agrees to go with me. I didn't mention it to Tony that he'd be coming, because it was kind of a last-minute plan, and obviously, even though I enjoyed the meeting the first time, I also had a life and other things going on in it, so I just didn't want to meet him more than an hour because I had shit to do. We get to Subway next to the library and he's there, waiting. I introduce him to my brother and Tony cracks a few jokes about how he feels short next to Scott. We all laughed and started talking. After about 5 minutes, Tony makes his comment: So nice to meet you, Scott. I hope to see you again soon. As in basically dismissing him. Scott and I exchange glances, and Scott replies that he drove me here, so he's going to join in. Tony doesn't skip a beat, and says the more the merrier. I remember feeling relieved. Anyway, we all talked for about an hour, and it truly is another great conversation. We literally had a Bible study, and it was really engaging. Scott and I bought him a sandwich, and we had lunch together. After we left the meetup, I asked Scott what he thought. Scott thought he was really nice too. Cool guy. We both acknowledged that the fact that Tony obviously was just meeting with me, and how Scott felt like he was expected to leave at first, but we chalked it up to Tony just not expecting Scott to stay for the Bible study. Thank you for a wonderful morning, and again for the nourishment, it will be great. I had a great time chatting with your brother, he seems like a good man. Any woman who finds him will be more than lucky. Next time we meet, just let me know, I will continue praying for your loved one. It will be fine, I guarantee it, I promise. I love you so much for being the friend I now have. I will be there for you no matter what, love. Your BFF, Tony. Reading these emails now is so cringe, but yeah, honestly, I just chalked it up to him being lonely and generally looking for a friend. We continued to email back and forth. For every one email I would send, he would send back like 3 or 4. At one point, he sends me this. Send me a pic of you so I can look at it when I need that extra smile. And I fucking did. I felt strange sending one, but I swear to God I opened up my photo booth and took a picture of me making a funny face and waving at the camera. Jesus Christ. I didn't tell anyone. He asked me for a picture because I knew it sounded textbook creepy, but I literally rationalized it in my head that he was old and lonely and honestly just looking for a friend. He told me he loved me like he would a daughter. I think we met up like 4 more times. Tony lived out in Santsea, but it would take the trolley to Mission Valley. We met up once more at Starbucks, but Scott couldn't make it. I didn't have any qualms about it at this point. I didn't ask why he was homeless or how he got there, and he never volunteered the information to this day. I wondered if I had asked what he would have said. It felt rude for me to pry, and I figured in due time he would open up about it. The second time, I invited him to attend church with Scott and I. The church we went to is made up of mostly young adults. This Sunday night after the service, the church was hosting a BBQ and fellowship night. Tony definitely stood out, but he held his own. And during the event, I saw him talking to a couple guys from church. I was glad. I wanted him to meet other Christian men and make more friendships because honestly, it was starting to get kind of suffocating. Tony kept saying that Scott and I were his only friends, but he only communicated with me. On the drive home, I specifically remember him telling me that he introduced himself to Pastor Wes, our pastor, and he relayed the conversation they had. Remember this because it's important. November rolls around, and after our last meeting, Tony mentioned his birthday was coming up. I talked to Scott, and because I wanted Tony to feel like he had some sort of family on his birthday, he told me he had no one. We agreed to invite him over for dinner. A super obvious PSA that probably no one needs to hear, but I needed to. Do not invite a homeless stranger into your home, no matter how nice they seem, dear God. I was genuinely trying to make the guy feel welcome and loved, and it was because of the stigma of homelessness that I wanted to do the opposite and show him that I wasn't afraid to let him see where I lived. Homelessness is dehumanizing, and I wanted him to feel like a person on his own birthday. Scott was way more hesitant about letting him come over. I advocated for Tony, and eventually Scott agreed. I told him to bring his laundry and I would wash it for him, and we let him wash up beforehand in my bathroom. Stupid, stupid, stupid. I also invited my best friend Grace and her boyfriend Robert. I did the cooking, and I asked them what his favorite meal was. Steak with tons of caramelized onions and butter, salad with Russian dressing, mashed potatoes, and a Dutch apple pie. I went to Ralph's and blew $80 on the ingredients to make it. Tony was super grateful and said it was the best meal he'd had since his wife passed away. I mentioned that I had a psychiatrist appointment the next day. Tony at this time had got one of those Obama phones and would call every once in a while. To be honest, when he got the phone, I was honestly kind of worried about it because he now has another way to stay in contact with me, and it was kind of draining trying to keep up with him. I have 2 of his voicemails saved. This guy is a textbook manipulative. He changes his voices from like a completely different person from the first to the second. The first one was after his birthday dinner. The second one, I was running late meeting him, and he was not happy about it. It was very different. Sunday rolls around, and Tony joins Scott and I for church again. After a big group of us decides to go to this Mediterranean place, everyone orders, and by the time we get seated, it's me, Scott, Tony, our friend Brandon, and my friend Julia at one end of the table. Tony and Brandon get to talking. I wasn't really paying that much attention because I was chatting with Julia. I had paid for Tony's meal, and he originally tried to do some catfish dish. It was really one of the most expensive items on the menu, but I was happy to do it. The restaurant was out of it. I remember this distinctly. When the waitress came back to the table to tell Tony we were out, he made a big deal about it, like kind of abrasive, sighing like he was personally offended, and was served demeaning to the waitress when she offered up other options. I remember feeling both apologetic towards the waitress and honestly kind of intimidated by Tony. Once he got the replacement dish, he was back to joking around and being friendly. I chalked it up to him being just really tired and hungry. After dinner, I offered to drive Tony home, and I did, alone. When he wasn't at the shelter, he said he lived on a bench way out in Santsea. I remember this night, it had kind of started to rain. I felt bad for Tony, and he had kind of way of making you feel bad for him too for being homeless, both in his emails and in person. Driving out to the bench in the cold, I felt both a nagging obligation to offer him a dry place to sleep, and the disconcerting feeling that he was expecting me to offer. I actually had previously considered it, but both Scott and I discussed it, and we didn't want to invite him over to spend the night even once, for fear of setting up a pattern or expectations in the future. I'm nearing the bench, and he's making it clear he's unhappy and tired of being homeless. I'm so sick of this. You're the only good thing in my life, Kelly. We chat for a bit. I try to encourage him, and we make plans for me to pick him up for church the next week. Right before he exits the car, he leans over and gives me a quick kiss goodbye. On the lips. No, not okay. I'm definitely uncomfortable with that. That is way crossing the line. I feel immediately weird and violated. I kinda stammer out a goodbye and pull out of the parking lot, leaving Tony standing there, watching me as I go. Driving home, I felt gross. I'm also now uncomfortable as it dawns on me that I just drove a man 40 years older than me that I barely know to an area where no one else is around at night. These are huge no-nos up until that point. I was oblivious to, because the manic of me was just thinking I was making a positive impact in the Grandpa Tony's life. I get home, and was probably there about 30 minutes, when Scott gets a text from Brandon. I hadn't told Scott about the kiss at this point. I asked Scott if he had the conversation he had. This is the text. Hey, what are your vibes on that guy? He's nice enough. I've talked to him a little bit. What are your impressions? I agree. I hate to say this, but I'm pretty sure he's a pathological liar. He said he was in the Navy for 8 years and got to the rank of Master Chief. That takes a lifetime of service to get there, and only a few people get there in their life. There were a few other big loopholes I heard too, but he's a nice guy and needs to be loved. Just be careful with him around Kelly and the others. I have this gut feeling, a sinking one. Scott and I talk about it. Maybe he's overcompensating for the fact that he's homeless? He goes by Tony, but I knew his full name from his email address. I hadn't bothered to look him up before. Told me he has no social media accounts, and didn't know the first thing about setting one up. I remember teasing him that he should join the 21st century and stuff like that. I never searched him up because there was no reason to. I type his name in the Google search bar, and the first thing that pops up makes me want to throw up. It's a mugshot for Megan's Law, and the Tony in the picture is terrifying. This man is a violent registered sex offender. I instantly feel sick to my stomach and terrified. I've been with this guy an hour ago alone by myself in the middle of nowhere Santsea. The next result after his mugshot was his Facebook profile, the one he said he never had. I can't stop myself from clicking on it. I want to know everything about this guy now. All he has is one profile picture and 1,520 friends, all young women, my age. Then I go to Instagram and search his name. Sure enough, he's there. The only people he follows are Instagram models in lingerie, women with bare asses and huge tits and BDSM stuff. He has 20 followers, and every single one is a sex-related chat for money type account. Fuck. I call my cousin and my aunt, who advised me to report this guy to the police. He hasn't done anything against the law though, really, and I feel both gross and conflicted on what to do. He's been preying upon young women, and I was stupid enough to fall for it. I called Pastor Wes, because I knew he had spoken with Tony and Scott, and I were kind of at odds with what to do. Sup, Kelly? I explained the situation since Wes is at least familiar with who Tony is, and they talked. Oh, that black guy? Yeah, I vaguely remember him. Wes meets a lot of people every Sunday, so I assume he just forgot. I remember about the conversation he had with Tony. Kelly, I never spoken to him or even had an interaction with the guy. The only reason I know who he is and remember him is because he was really rude to Monica at the BBQ because she wouldn't let him in the kitchen. Monica is Wes's wife. Holy shit. Tony had told me that they talked and word for word relayed their conversation to me. Never happened. Instantly everything has a new meaning and an extra sinister twist to it. I feel both incredibly violated and so mind-fucked that someone could lie that effortlessly straight to my face without missing a beat. I didn't even ask him about Wes. Tony is the one who brought it up. I thought about all the other conversations we've had, and now I know this guy was just saying whatever he felt like in order to gain my trust, which he did. I let this guy into my home. I let him in my shower, showed him pictures of my family. Jesus. Long story not short, after discovering this and talking to my friends and family, I reported Tony to the police and sent him an email explaining that I didn't want any contact with him anymore. I still had some of his laundry at my house, and I didn't want to give him an excuse to come and get it. In the email, I told him his clothes were clean, and he could come pick them up at the church, but not to contact me anymore. I was hoping that would be the end of it. I blocked his number, but hadn't on Gmail. Email after email, he sent me dozens, pleading to talk so he could explain himself. I didn't take the bait. My friend who actually works for Gavin de Becker, he wrote the book The Gift of Fear, and it's all about predators who use manipulation to take advantage of you, advised me this: never respond to a stalker, even if you ignore 500 messages and respond to only one. All that is taught as a stalker is that if he just needs to keep bothering you 500 times until he gets a response. The email started off kindly enough and then turned accusatory. He actually threatened suicide in one. I'll let the police know. I screenshotted a few, and then I blocked him. For the next few days, I was terrified to be in my apartment alone. I couldn't go anywhere by myself. I bought a mace and a taser online, and anytime I needed to drive somewhere or return home, I would call Scott or a friend so they could come walk me and to and from my car if I was by the apartment. Thankfully, Thanksgiving break was the next week, and so I had a reprieve of the paranoia when Scott and I were visiting home, families. When we returned to San Diego, a few days passed, and by this point, it had been 2 weeks since I blocked Tony. No word or sight from him during this time, and although I was extremely anxious to be home alone by myself, with each passing day I grew a little more relieved. If he hadn't come by at this point, he probably got the message to leave me alone. It was December 4th. Scott had made previous plans to visit LA the upcoming weekend to visit friends, and I had obligations in San Diego, so I felt okay to stay here by myself while he went out of town. The night before, Grace and Robert were hosting a party to celebrate Robert's graduation from EMT school. Knowing we'd be drinking and having a good time, my friend Michaela planned to spend the night, and we would Uber over there together. The night was a frickin' blast. We got home at 2 a.m. in the morning, buzzed and happy. The next morning, I made her breakfast, and she left shortly afterwards. It was 10 a.m. 10 minutes after Michaela left, I hear a knock at the door. I'm praying it's Michaela, realizing she forgot something, but I had this huge knot in my stomach. As I approach the people, I look out and scream internally. It's Tony. Thank God the door was locked, because even though I didn't answer and didn't say a word, Tony knew I was home. My car was in the driveway. He didn't say anything, just pounded on the door, relentless knocking. There's a window if you walk around the door where you can see into the apartment, and even though it was closed, I was freaked out that he would walk around and see me. I ran into Scott's bathroom, which was the farthest thing away from the front door, with a kitchen knife, my mace, my taser, and called 911. I could still hear him pounding on the door. I frantically explained to the 911 officer the situation, and they said they would send someone over. I hang up and FaceTime Grace and Robert to let them know what's going on, and they head in their car to my apartment. While this is happening, the knocking stops, and I'm praying he's given up and left. Then I hear a crash in the balcony I can't see, and there's no way in hell I'm leaving the bathroom. But I'm positive this motherfucker had climbed over the railing. I was now trying to get in through the sliding glass door. Fucking A! Was the balcony door locked? I was 99% sure because I've been vigilant and paranoid about locking the doors, but having come in buzzed the night before, I couldn't remember if I had double-checked it before bed. That 1% of uncertainty was absolutely terrifying. I called 911 again in panic, explaining that this man is now trying to break in. The dispatcher asked if he has weapons, and I honestly don't know. This guy is dangerous, he's cunning. And he had told me himself that he carries a switchblade on the street for protection. Out of all the lies he told me, I do believe he was in the military, and probably had some combat training at least. The dispatcher tells me to stay on the line until the police arrive. I can't hear anything. I don't know if that's because he's given up, or if it's because he opened the door and made it inside my home. In that moment, I honestly thought I was going to die. I thought Tony was going to break in, rape me, and kill me. My mind just broke in fear. I remember frantically praying over and over again a million times. I heard a loud pounding on the front door again. Police! I was so terrified that it could be Tony pretending to be a police officer, but the 911 dispatcher assured me that it was indeed the police at the door. I opened the door in a frenzy. 4 cops are standing there. 2 are next to my door, and the other 2 are a little off to the side with Tony. I had a literal breakdown after seeing him. I just started sobbing. I was freaking out and inconsolable. The cops took him away, and the main officer was extremely kind and comforting. He gave me instructions on how to file a restraining order. Having that experience, and becoming so paranoid about Tony triggered full-blown mania in me. I couldn't sleep at all for 2 nights straight after this happened, and posted on social media constantly, messaging everyone. I started believing I had survived death, and come out with all these mind-blowing observations on the other side. Looking back, it's so embarrassing, the shit I put out on Facebook, but that's its own story. My family had already been concerned, and this was the tipping point. I got admitted to the hospital, ended up staying there for 2 weeks, becoming full-blown psychotic by that point. Once I was more stabilized, the hospital issued me a day pass so I could get my restraining order from the court downtown. I had to face Tony in court to do this, and it was awful. I was praying he wouldn't show, but he did. Brendan and Scott testified, and then it was Tony's turn to speak. This guy straight out lied to the judge's face that this was a mutual relationship, and I was the one in love with him. That changed my mind, and the only reason he went by my house was to pick up his laundry. I didn't even have his fucking laundry, and he knew it, and knew that I knew it. God, watching this guy lie and turn on his charm was disgusting, and I was sitting in the chair trembling at every bit of this. My turn to speak. I presented the judge with printouts of every single fucking email he sent me, his Facebook account and Instagram accounts with all the young women. Tony was shocked that I had evidence. She threw the book at him. It felt like something from Law and Order, I swear. Gave him this whole speech to never take advantage of a young woman again, or he would have to answer to her. God, it was sweet, sweet justice. He wasn't allowed to be within 100 yards of me, and was ordered to stay away from the Fenton Parkway Center. I never saw him again, and I've moved since. The paranoia after that lasted for a long time. From this experience, I now know that the mood swings I've been having for years was manic depression, and that I have bipolar disorder. Shit sucks, and right now, I am back in a fucking sick hole of a depression, but yeah, fun times. Tony. Let's never meet again.